The Product Marketing Alliance membership is an incredible resource for product marketers with all types of experience.
It's definitely a goldmine of information and resources, from the Slack community to the templates and resources.
I can go out and see how are other people thinking about their growth strategies or product adoption. How are others thinking about the best ways to do customer interviews, or how others are setting up the content or customer advisory boards.
There's some great real life examples that I can either make a copy of or take as inspiration and really make my own.
Getting access to the videos and the templates is more than worth the cost, because you get to see what the top PMMs are doing and how they think.
From persona frameworks to go-to-market templates to articles written by experienced product marketers, this content has become an additional resource to help me succeed at my job.
My personal favorite is the mentorship program. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
When I have some planning time available, I love to look at the different videos and conferences that they have posted. I always love to hear how other companies are handling some of the challenges and opportunities that product marketing has.
I could then figure out what's the best way to adapt for us, as well as look at how other people are implementing them. So I can ultimately do the work of 5 individuals as a solo PMM.
Whether you're just transitioning into the field or you're a product marketing expert, I think there's content and materials that are useful for everyone.
And as someone looking to break into the role, I get a good grasp of what I should be doing and also what will make me successful once I do.
And the best thing is that as members, we get access to new content all the time. PMA constantly keeps adding more materials, articles, and tools.
This whole program's been very validating for me in my career.
And so I highly encourage you to check out.
I believe they keep pushing the bar and supporting their members to ensure that we become experts in the field.
Not on the side.
room and first time in New York for the PMA since 2019. So we are very happy to be back. So thank you all for coming today. Couple of housekeeping points to get through quickly. We do have Wi-Fi. It is just the ETC Venues network, and the password is Wi-Fi 5032. There's little notes on the desks as well. So do log in if you haven't already. Also, we please ask that your phones are switched to silent today out of respect to the speakers, and we will be using Slido for Q&A and interactivity throughout the day. Again, QR codes on the slides and on the tables. It should be super simple just to scan that or enter the code PMMNYC, and then you can ask and upvote all your questions and get your answers. Also, agenda, QR codes, and also on the website as well. It's the most up-to-date version. So that's all that leaves me to do this morning is introduce our fantastic chairperson for the day. We are joined by the wonderful Jason Oakley, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Clue, who will guide you through the day. So welcome, Jason.
Test. Cool. Hey, everybody. I'm excited. This is exciting. I don't know if anyone, like, show of hands, who's been at an event, or is it your first event back after like 2 years? Right? This is great. So it's cool to be back at events. And not only is it cool to be back at events, but surrounded by product marketers. So, when I joined the Clue team in December, I was excited because obviously great team, great product, but I was just excited to work with product marketers. So, just to be able to market to them and to learn from them. And so I just find product marketers are so interesting. So to be in a room surrounded by product marketers is it's a lot of fun. So I'm excited for the next couple of days. So over the next couple of days, we have just about over 30 product marketing leaders who are going to cover a wide range of topics. So everything from positioning and messaging, sales enablement, win-loss, services marketing, and everything in between. So there's a ton of different topics that we're going to cover. And on that note, one of the things that I wanted to do was to do a quick just poll with the audience to see what topics you're most interested in learning, or the topic that you're most interested in learning over the next couple of days, or let's just say today. So check out the Slido. So get that set up. We'll give you a minute to do that. Oh, haven't we started already? Is that on the poll already? Wow, look at that. Okay, so let's just see, 'cause I'm curious to see what everyone is interested in learning. So sales enablement, big one. That's awesome. Positioning and messaging, win-loss, go-to-market. This is great. I love this. So it looks like you're in the right place, because these are all topics that we're going to be covering today. So it looks like the winner there, positioning and messaging, sales enablement, go-to-market. Very cool. All right. Now, one other thing before we kick things off, I just wanted to do a quick icebreaker, so to speak. And don't worry, I'm not going to get you to kind of go around and do tic-tac-toe or anything like that. But I want to ask a few questions. I want to ask the questions. If they're true, just stand up out of your seat. So this is I find this a good icebreaker, just so everyone knows in the room, people around them who have similar interests or in a similar situation, stuff like that. So the first question that I want to ask is, stand up if you are a product marketer. Surprise, surprise. All right, we're in the right place. Awesome. Okay, stay standing. And stay standing if you've been a product marketer for more than 3 years. Okay. Stay standing if you've been a product marketer for more than 5 years. Awesome. So I think what we can see is there is a wide range, but one, there is a ton of product marketing experience in this room. And so one of the things I'd encourage everyone to do is during the breaks, get out there, spot the people who have product marketing experience. Everyone here is a product marketer who can share a lot of valuable knowledge, but there's a lot of people you can learn from in this room. So everyone, you can sit down. Thank you. Next question is an easy one. Who here has a March Madness bracket? All right. Winning? Yeah. Gonzaga. I went to a high school called Gonzaga, so I'm a Gonzaga fan, even though it has nothing to do with. Yeah, there we go. All right. Cool, you can sit down. Who is the only product marketer at their company? Okay, a few solo PMMs. Here we go. All right. Nice. This is an interesting one I'm always interested in. Where do you sit? Where does product marketing sit within your organization? So who here sits under product or reports into product, that sort of thing? Okay. Cool. All right, you can sit down. Stand if you report into marketing. All right. Seems like marketing is where most people report into. And then stand if you don't report into either of those teams and you report into something different. So it's either product or marketing. Cool. All right, my last question before we kick things off. Who here believes that pineapple does not belong on pizza? I know who to avoid. All right. I love pineapple on pizza. I'm a big Hawaiian fan. All right. So I think we'll kick off our first speaker. So I'm going to welcome her to the stage. So this first presentation is going to be our first speaker is currently the head of market intelligence and product strategy at Samsung Ads. She's also a professor of marketing at the Fordham Gabelli School of Business in New York. She believes that developing a go-to-market strategy is as much about the journey as it is about the destination, and positioning is a big part of that. And she's going to show us that by taking us through a tour of the Louvre. I'm really excited for this. Welcome, Jacqueline Keller.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. It was nice to meet you. But I need a third hand. Is this your coffee?
Yes, you want me to get that out of the way?
I mean, if you want to drink it.
I'll get my stuff out of the way.
Hi, everyone. I am going to try to multitask, so we'll see how this works with my notes up here and the slides down here. It's so exciting to be here in person. It's actually crazy to be here in person. I think the last time I was here at a PMA summit, I was pregnant with my second daughter who's turning 3 soon. So that says a lot about where the world's been the last couple of years. So I'm really, really excited to be with all of you today. Like Jason mentioned, I oversee market intelligence, really those foundational tracks at Samsung Ads, and that kind of depends on what the priority is internally at the time. That could be buyer persona diligence or competitive intelligence. Right now we're actually reevaluating the product market fit for Samsung Ads because we started as just a tile ad unit and we've expanded it to CTV. So that means a lot in terms of the value we could bring to our customers. So today I'm going to be focusing on, I would like to say I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to product marketing. Let me make sure this actually works. Yes. So physically, we're all here in New York, but with the pandemic, I haven't actually traveled to Europe since 2017. Really regret not going in 2018 or 2019. So I've been dreaming of Europe, and I'm going to take us on this little trip to some of my favorite pieces within European museums. So it's one of those analogies, I was just telling Sam, that it's one of those analogies that I think kind of helps bring some of those foundational product marketing tactics to life. And I appreciate, I guess, your patience. So the funny thing is about product marketing, again, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job flipping between this, is I learned a lot from my 5-year-old in terms of how to break down concepts into, I guess, simplified benefits. So rather than talking about features, talking about the benefits. And my 5-year-old is learning about French art in school. So she came home with this, and guys, I'm so sorry. I promise I will get better at this transition. And the thing about this is that there are certain skills I've realized that regardless of where you work, Jason just went through, like, you report up into product, you report into marketing. I've seen sometimes where product marketing actually reports up into sales, depending on where you're at. And something that is consistent across all the product marketers I've spoken with is this role that we play in what I call collecting and connecting the dots. So we do that diligence, that scoping, and we try to understand, how does this benefit our customers? What is the meaning behind this? Again, to be able to lean into more benefit marketing rather than being feature oriented. To translate it into meaning. But the difference between, I would say, a 5-year-old and where she begins, where there's this clear start here, versus what we have to do in our roles, is a lot of times we have to determine where that one begins. And I don't think there's a consistent answer. It's not always the same place. There's not like a right way to start or a wrong way to start. You kind of collect the dots, and as you collect the dots, the picture kind of starts to form in your mind. So today I want to talk a little bit about what we do at Samsung Ads as we're collecting those dots. How do we make it meaningful, and how does that influence our strategy? Because we don't always have that like one in terms of where to start. So first we're going to go through macro context, the important role of doing diligence and understanding what's going on in the world. COVID-19 obviously impacted a lot of product strategy and how we kind of take things to market. Customer insight, the importance of talking to customers, competitive intelligence, and then finally how that influences the go-to-market strategy. This, obviously, I think we're all familiar with these tactics, but I'm going to try to paint a picture in terms of how we use each of them. And there is a sequencing that's involved. Like, we always start with the macro context. Of course, you might gain a little bit of intel about competitors while you're also exploring what makes your customers happy. But ultimately, all of this starts with this macro context. And to be clear, I'm not an art teacher. I do teach at Gabelli School of Business, but I focus on marketing, not art. But I did love my art classes in college, and I actually, in some cases, learned more about, I guess, the world and democracy from my art classes than I did from my political science classes. And what I learned from art and what I want to talk about a little bit today is how we can take that macro context, how art plays a role in terms of talking about social commentary or what was relevant at that specific moment in time. And for us product marketers, looking at macro context and what matters to our customers, that definitely influences the positioning. I saw that as a big word on the screen in terms of what we're all here to learn today. What messages are going to resonate or what will kind of fall flat. So let's start with some pieces of art at the Louvre. So step one on the product marketer's roadmap is this market intelligence. I'm going to do my best to pronounce these correctly, so apologies to anyone who is an expert in art. The first one you'll see here is the Nike Samothrace. So this is a striking piece that sits at the top of the museum, at the top of the steps at the Louvre, and it's from the Hellenistic era. And the base of the monument is shaped in the style of a Greek Hellenistic worship. This area as a whole represents the military conquest of Alexander the Great, where he endeavored to, I want to use his words, reach the ends of the world and the great outer sea. So it's this one statue, but it represents a lot in terms of what was happening at that time. And some of the values that we have today are actually representative of the Hellenistic era. So really beautiful. If you've never been to the Louvre, you can now get a ticket. We can now travel. The world's opened up. Highly recommend that piece. The second portrait here is a classic of Leonardo da Vinci's. Sorry, that D should be lowercase, but and it represents realism. And just to give a little bit of color for those of you who don't remember from history class 10, 15 years ago, the Renaissance was a time of rediscovering classical learning. So it literally means rebirth, with a focus on values like individualism, skepticism, so asking questions, secularism and worldliness, and being well-rounded and informed. So it was a time where it was actually okay to ask questions. Historically, you didn't want to ask questions, and that was encouraged. Start asking questions because that's how we're going to evolve. So Leonardo's Virgin of the Rocks uses this technique called sfumato, which he described as blending colors without the use of lines or borders in the manner of smoke. So if you look at this, what he did versus some of the art pieces before him is he actually was able to bring this realistic view into the art. So one of the themes of the time was realism and how we could kind of talk about things in a real way rather than abstract ways, and he actually brought this style into the art that he did. And the last piece here is by Eugene Delacroix, and it captures the spirit of the French Revolution. I don't know if many people here are Les Mis fans. I don't know if anyone's seen Les Mis, but it confused me when I looked up the date of this piece because I've always loved it, and it's honestly one of my favorite pieces. It's really, really powerful. But it's confusing because it's from 1830, but that's not when the French Revolution took place. It actually is from 50 years later. And it captures a lot of the motifs from the revolution. You'll see kind of this chaos in the street. There's like a little boy holding a gun. That would not be okay to paint today. An individual in a top hat, soldiers. And the difference between the French Revolution and the moment in time here is there was actually a second French Revolution where it was the first time where the French government had a constitution, use the exact liberty driven by a constitution. So this female character here represents liberty, and again, it's painting a picture for that moment in time where They made progress with the first French Revolution, and then the second French Revolution was brought to life with the painting. And I found that fascinating because I had no idea. I always assumed that it represented the first, but after the first, there were still kings in charge, and this was the second time where the Constitution played a role. So all three of these works speak volume to the macro, social, and kind of economic and political climate at the time. And when it comes to product marketing, taking that this big picture view, and again, I'm not just talking about the macro context in terms of like what industry you're working in. Yes, Toyota needs to be thinking about car manufacturing, or I don't know, I took the subway today, so Slack's top of mind. Obviously, they have to be thinking about technology, but really looking at the world view, especially with globalization and the Internet of Things, is more important than ever before with product marketers. So to translate this kind of into practical application of what this means for us, here are some of the kind of tactical things we can do, and we do at Samsung Ads, to help us think about how macro context can influence our strategy. So the first thing we always look at, we're marketers, we look at measurement and data. So this means, how do we collect the data? What are the inputs? Something we talk a lot about is the quality of the data. And I think everyone talks about the quality of the data, so even differentiating what makes your data different. For us, we have real concrete data coming from hardware, and from there we can actually better understand what consumers want, why they're approaching smart TVs. What we've learned is that consumers actually want their smart TVs to tell them what to do. They come to us for guidance. We'll see that some consumers come and they have a very specific intent in mind. So we'll see someone comes, turns on their TV, and they go straight to gaming. That person knows what they want to do. They are not interested in us recommending some sort of piece of content. There are other consumers that come, they turn on the TV, and we can see they're kind of flipping through. They want us to guide them in terms of their experience. So from a feature perspective, how could we help them better find the content that is relevant to them? Targeting is important. Making sure we understand the ads that will be relevant to the consumer, that can improve the overall ad experience. So measurement is a big part of what comes after, but for us, looking at measurement and understanding consumers is also something that is kind of pre-campaign and pre-go-to-market. Another piece is digital transformation. It's where companies consider how their products and businesses and processes can be improved. And I think this is a buzzword a couple years back, and it's continued to be so. And COVID in some ways kind of like fast-tracked this for certain industries. Again, back to Samsung Ads and CTV. I started my career in linear television, so worked at Discovery and Turner. I think they're all part of Warner Media now. And what's happened is you'll see that the linear networks that used to just be going through linear pipes, they first started this digital transformation by creating mobile apps. And there was this fear that mobile is going to take over all the revenue, and there's going to be nothing left for these businesses that are experts in content creation. But in reality, what we've seen is that was like a step towards this digital transformation, but what consumers love is the content, and they come to the screen that's kind of in the center of their homes, and they still are watching on their TVs. Just technology has changed how they're doing that. And I think the last piece of data I looked at, it was about 75% of homes were streaming and also watching linear TV. Only 3% were linear only. So it's not that streaming's gone away, and we'll get into that a little bit more. It's just this slow transformation. And we view it kind of like as a spectrum. It's not black and white, one or the other, it's both. And how can we kind of help the consumer and help brands? So linear networks are launching these streaming apps. That's an example of digital transformation. How could we partner rather than compete? And finally, there's this element of social responsibility, and this is another theme that's become increasingly important for individuals and corporations. And this is where we expect each other to act in the best interest of the environment and broader society. And for anyone who joined, unfortunately, CES was virtual. We thought we'd be here, but we weren't just yet. Anyone who joined CES virtually might have heard Samsung's keynote, where we talked about kind of our focus, our vision for 2022 and beyond. And it's an outlook where technology exists together with people and for the planet, and where customized and connected experiences live. And that, again, kind of ties back to ad experiences and how we're thinking about improving content experiences and ad experiences, and those go hand in hand. So, slowly getting better. So one thing I want to call out is that market dynamics accelerate trends or themes. So you might notice certain things are happening in the world, like digital transformation, but they could get fast-tracked. So here's an example of how COVID really impacted trends that were already headed in a certain direction. Based on, I believe, I want to make sure I quote the right study, it was a Microsoft study. Basically, research shows that consumers tried out e-commerce for the first time during the pandemic because they couldn't leave their homes. My mother-in-law has been very scared to use the phone for anything other than making phone calls. The phone is like an often unused app on my phone, but it was the pandemic that got her to start using Instacart because she couldn't get groceries any other way. And what's interesting from a product marketing perspective is this is helping companies kind of move along that product market fit. I had a conversation last night with one of the teams in my class, and they're representing Carvana. And they were saying that historically Carvana was catering to millennials. But now that there's this new segment that is a little bit more digital savvy, they could reevaluate their product market fit. They have this untapped market that might also want the convenience of Carvana. So little things like that, it's one thing in the market can completely change your strategy and change the product that you could take to market. So thank you COVID-19 in some ways, because it kind of fast-tracked things. There's also this disruption of hybrid work. I think all of us are experiencing this, where we used to go into the office maybe every day or most days. As I was commuting, I'm like, I can't believe I did this every day. This is so strange. The subway was crowded. What's going on here? But I think that this shift is actually going to impact the kind of talent that companies can get. There needs to be more flexibility. So if you think about a company and the HR team as kind of the product, if the market wants something different, you're going to have to evolve in order to stay competitive. And finally, there's this streaming that I mentioned before, where streaming has become like a worthy opponent to those linear TV eyeballs. And I'm gonna dive in a little bit more here just because it is data that I directly have access to. What we've seen at Samsung Ads is there was an influx of streaming during the early days of the pandemic, with the greatest growth to date being in the second quarter of 2020. So if you think back to that time, that was like kind of around the time of lockdown. What were you going to do? You were going to learn how to make cocktails at home, and you're going to stream. Pretty much, that's what happened. And similar to digital shopping and hybrid work, we see firsthand from our proprietary data that streaming is most certainly here to stay. You'll see there are no declines, with streaming maintaining over 60% share of time. And as a product marketer, understanding these consumer behaviors and macro trends has helped inform my starting point for various tracks and diligence work. So from market macro context, we're gonna head over to customer insight, which is one of my favorite things, like, because you think you know, but you don't know until you talk to the customers, and then you're surprised often. So going back to our fun little tour of European art, in practice, this is speaking with core customers. Like, it's not a new concept. Botticelli actually did it, well, how many years ago? I'm not great at math. Not great at math. I'm great at understanding math. Let's say 500 years ago. He was a Renaissance artist, and he initially made a living painting religious scenes for the church. And you'll see this all the way to the left. But during that time, the customer set expanded from church to wealthy patrons. You might have heard of them, the Medicis. I kind of think of them as the power users of Renaissance art, because they really drove a lot of the innovation that we see today. So he was welcomed freely within the Medici home, and it was listening to their intellectual conversations that Botticelli was inspired to evolve his painting from religious scenes to secular, worldly topics. And you can see here the evolution of his product and how he evolved his definition of product market fit. So the first is religious. The second is a portrait that really highlights that realism, and it's considered a masterpiece. And then finally, The Birth of Venus. This actually was considered pretty taboo. I know it's a famous piece in the Louvre now, but it's supposed that it came from the Medici family, but it wasn't revealed until years later, just because of the themes that are within this piece of art. But you can see that he was impacted by that macro context, the conversations that the Medici family was having. It was not religious in nature, and it kind of drove the world forward. So this is an example of listening to customers, but within that broader macro context. Another favorite example of mine is, it was this HBR article talks about this, so if you're curious, go Google, I think it's the 2016 article. But basically it talked about how Lexus came from interviews with customers. So Lexus decided that there was this opportunity to grow the relationship they had with customers. Customers loved the Toyota Camry and Corolla, but they saw that these customers were dropping off as they became more wealthy and they could afford like the BMWs and Mercedes-Benz. And they thought, do you want to know what? We need to create a luxury vehicle. This is a no-brainer. But they did something that many companies don't do, and the difference of what they did versus what they could have done kind of changed the course of their product's future. They went and sent a team of designers to California, and they interviewed customers and dealerships about what they were looking for in a luxury vehicle. And in trying to figure out what features they should put in the car, they discovered that they couldn't actually roll out a Toyota luxury car because of the perception of the brand to have some sort of luxury car sitting next to a Corolla on the parking lot. Like, that was not going to work for them. They actually needed to completely launch a new brand. So I think this kind of underscores the importance of talking to customers, because instead of just launching this new amazing car with different features under the Toyota brand, they launched a whole new brand. And we all know about the Lexus brand today, and it's still developing under their innovation. There we go. So some examples of what we use for trying to gather that customer insight. So industry research is huge. If someone's done the work, and also if your competitors have access to the information, then it's worth investing in that. We just purchased this digital out-of-home study. We actually went out and spoke to customers last summer to better understand the market, but then we made sure to augment it with industry research to make sure that we didn't miss anything. There are market surveys, so we often send out, if we're trying to dive deep on a very specific topic, we'll invest in market surveys. There are focus groups. You could do focus groups with customers. I also do focus groups with my sales team, because they're like on the front lines talking to the customers every single day. They've saved me the work. I might talk to 3 customers and come away with a different conclusion than hearing how the sales team, like how something's landing. And I'm taking something to market in a few weeks it's launching, and I just kind of test drove the narrative with a lot of the sellers, had them take it to a few clients, and then we refined the positioning before the broad launch. And it's helpful that they have those customers that we could kind of back channel with to get that intel. And then finally, like I mentioned before, customer interviews. Nothing beats talking directly to the customer. It's the same way you can watch a customer use your product. You might think that they're going to use it in a certain way, and then they don't. I started streaming a few shows on Apple Plus, actually, and I was actually surprised by the UI, because I don't tell Samsung, but I have an iPhone. I love my iPhone, I love my FaceTiming, but it's always been so seamless. It works with my Mac that isn't a Mac. And I was surprised by the way the interface of Apple Plus was working, and I think a lot of that could have probably been addressed had they, I know they launched during COVID, but had they sat in a room and actually watched customers use the app. And I do, it's Apple, I expect them to improve that over time, certainly. And then the next stop, how am I doing on time? I'm good? Yeah, okay. The next stop on our roadmap is competitive intelligence. And this, I would say, again, we could do all these along the way, but there is this sequencing where it's understanding what's happening broadly in the world, talking to customers to understand their perspective of what's happening in the world, and then seeing what the competitive set is doing. So simply stated, competitive intelligence is essentially seeing what customers are buying or using if they're not using your product. Uber, I don't know, what's a competitor for Uber? And I think COVID kind of made us think about this differently. It could be a bike. It could be, I got one of those like little motorcycle things, I don't know what they're called. That could be a competitor, a car itself, or a taxi. I don't think the taxi industry realized what an impact something like car sharing or like that dead equity, same with Rent the Runway. That's certainly a competitor to some of those clothing brands out there, because they're utilizing dead equity to go and satisfy the same customer problem. So kind of pivoting back to our analogy, let's look at some creative examples of this. So this is a piece from Leonardo da Vinci. You'll see that on the left, and Michelangelo. So they were known rivals, but what's interesting is that I believe Leonardo was about 50 years old when Michelangelo sculpted David, and Michelangelo was only 26 years old. And what was interesting about both of them is that they both studied human bodies, so they had the same data, market intelligence, so to speak, but they applied it in very different ways. So Leonardo's piece is this perfectly drawn line with a circle and square. It uses the proportions he found from measuring male models. And here he illustrates the symmetry of humans and helped bridge the gap between art and mathematics. And it was like very innovative for that time. Again, Renaissance realism. Michelangelo sculpted David to illustrate balance and realism, but the statue itself is not symmetrical or proportional. Like, for example, it's 17 feet tall. And so literally larger than life. I don't think any basketball players even are that tall yet. And the statue's hands are very large. What he focused on was the perception of the product, and what Da Vinci focused on was the technical reality of the product. And again, depending on your audience and depending on the product, the positioning will matter. So it's not a right or wrong, it's what makes the most sense to sell that product to your client to illustrate the benefit. Going to the next. Another fun example. This is kind of in contrast to the realism of the Renaissance. Matisse and Picasso dared to paint what was considered ugly at the time. I mean, some might argue this is still considered ugly, but they actually helped evolve the world's definition of beauty and art, and they're regarded as the fathers of 20th century's modern art. They met in the early 1900s, and they initially didn't like each other's paintings, but over time, they engaged in friendly competition, is what I would call it. In fact, I read that Picasso said, if I were not making the paintings I make, I would paint like Matisse. And Matisse compared their relationship to a boxing match. So definitely like frenemies, I think is how we would call them today. So from a product marketing perspective, I think they illustrate the value of collaboration to drive innovation. Like sometimes you need that competitor to push you towards better, because you might just stay with status quo. You might not be kind of driven to deliver something better for the customer if you don't have a competitor there to help you do better. Matisse has been described as a cool, calm, and collected artist, and Picasso was hot and temperamental. You kind of see this in their art here. And Matisse famously said that a painting should be like a comfortable armchair. His paintings are harmonious, they're luxurious, that's some of the words that were used, and they're soothing. And Picasso, on the other hand, contains elements of dissonance, disturbance, and violence. And I think from here we see something important in terms of product differentiation. They're both the fathers of modern day art, but they served similar markets, but they each kind of, I would say it's a very niche market. This is where you go real deep in terms of market segmentation. But they had different USPs, and they both succeeded. So it's like that competition, but it also drives you to really articulate what makes me special. And I think this is especially important today, where there's so many like, I don't know, there's a lot of marketing jargon, like we have the best data, we're the best at X, Y, and Z. Like how do you make it concrete and relevant so that it could break through the clutter? And it's really hard. It's like easier said than done. It's one of, I think, the hardest parts of my job is trying to figure out how to articulate differentiation. So here are some examples of what we use at Samsung Ads to gather that competitive intelligence. Obviously, there's the publicly available information. If it's publicly available, you can assume your competitors are looking at it. You should look at it too. Customer interviews, and this dovetails with talking to the customer. I learn a lot about the competitor, like by accident, just in terms of them sharing about what's working and what's not working. And then finally, and I think Clue is excellent for this, is the battle cards and objection handling, like actually collecting the information, creating a usable resource for the sales team, and keeping it up to date. I'm sure you'll talk about that more later, but you guys are experts in that. So finally, here we are. I guess the key takeaway of this framework is to look at macro context, to talk to the customers, and truth be told, it's just as much about the journey as the destination, because you wouldn't get to the destination without these steps along the way. It's like that takes me back to high school. All that Greek literature I read. So what can we learn from the Mona Lisa, and what would Europe have been without it? I think the reality is Mona Lisa would not exist without 16th century Europe. It's pretty much a trick question. Love those. It was the context of the time that made this painting so remarkable. I mentioned earlier that the Renaissance was a time where Hellenistic Greek values were kind of revitalized. Mona Lisa brings to life the values of secularism, realism, and individualism. It's considered secular because it's a portrait of a female, which was not something that was popular at that time, had nothing to do with God. So a portrait of a female without God involved, didn't happen. Realism is shown through the colors, through the sfumato, and the types of clothes that Leonardo put on her. And the value of individualism is clear, like she's sitting here by herself. It's not within a group, which is also unique for that time. It's almost as if Leonardo was working with a similar marketing framework as he took his products to market. I promise I didn't steal this from him, just learning from him. And this work is considered a quintessential example of Leonardo showing major Renaissance values in his work. With that, I'll be wrapping things up. Thank you so much for your time. I actually passed a Mona Lisa on my way here on Madison. I don't know if anyone else did, but I was like, it's a sign. I'm going to take a selfie with this. I'm really looking forward to this time together with you all. Thank you.
That was test. That was awesome, Jacqueline. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Do we have time for Q&A? Jacqueline, do you want to? Yeah, that was awesome. I think like anytime you can take a product marketing lesson and combine it with a history lesson, like that's very cool. Bravo. All right. So Rose, I think it's going to show. Great. Okay. So I'll toss up these questions for you. So number one is, do you have any advice on how to get customers to participate in research interviews? Do you incentivize? Is that an option?
We do formalize the program because if something is formalized, there's a website, it makes it feel more real. So definitely make it look polished, and also that's kind of just part of the Samsung brand. We don't actively incentivize like during the outreach. We send them a gift after the fact, so I give them like a code that they could go get like a free charger or something like that. I don't know if that helps, but there's no formal payment involved for talking to customers. We definitely tap into our sales like strong relationships. So it's them reaching out to their clients saying, hey, you've mentioned that you want to be like alpha beta partners. We're trying to learn how to better inform our product roadmap. Would you be willing to participate in the conversation? So it's kind of like that vision of you'll have a seat at the table later, but there's no promise there. It's just kind of endeavor.
Great. So question number 2, how often do you revise your product positioning, and what might prompt a revision?
So it depends on the product. So Samsung Ads holistically as a product, we're just now kind of fully revising our product market fit, and we launched almost 7 years ago. I think we probably could have used a refresh somewhere in between. We were just growing really quickly and COVID happened. In terms of the products that fit within our portfolio, it kind of depends on what we find within our diligence. So if the data changes, if the need for the specific market segment changes, you have to revise the positioning. I think product marketing, and there are different opinions, but for me, product marketing kind of stems from the brand hierarchy. So you need to have a really, really clear brand architecture in terms of what's your mission, what do you want to be. Product marketing is the tactics that bring that to life. But if a brand doesn't have clarity on who they are, it's going to be very difficult for product to nail what they're taking to market, because the positioning needs to be influenced by the brand.
True, very true. Okay. Rosa, we got time for one more? Great. Okay, last question. Do great marketers think of themselves as great artists? Why or why not?
I mean, I would say yes, obviously. Were you paying attention? Who asked that question? No. I think that most product marketers today are probably more like the Da Vinci's and the Leonardos. We look at the science and the research. I think there's this misperception that marketers are all about like fluff. I think that marketers rely very, very heavily on data. We might not be able to do math in our heads, but we are certainly quants because data tells the story and it influences the strategy. So the facts don't lie.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. Everyone give Jacqueline a round of applause.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Rose, do you need me to give you a hand? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Great. I'll take introducing our 2 next panelists. So what we're going to have now is a panel, and this is on a really, I love this topic because I think it's something that, literally everyone here has to do or has done, and I'm sure you're probably going to do it multiple times throughout your career. And it's going into a new organization. What do you do in your first 90 days to really understand that organization, make an impact, and hit the ground running? So our panelists today, I'll introduce them. The first one is the head of competitive intelligence at Imperva. So, sorry, never mind, wrong presentation. Let me do this again. Okay. Give me a sec. 1 second. Get my bearings here. Dun, 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 dun. Had a sheet. Okay, let's go off this instead. I'll just go off this. Oh, yes. Okay. So, fireside chat. How do you adapt? How do you evaluate and adapt to your new organizational structure and make an impact in the first 90 days? That's what I saw up top. So, Our two speakers today, we have the global head of product marketing at Compliant Vantage, and Rohan Modi is he has been a product marketer at over 6 companies. I looked it up on LinkedIn. He is an expert when it comes to product marketing in high-tech security, financial security businesses, and yeah, like I said, he's done this 6 times at 6 different companies. So let's welcome to the stage Rohan Modi. Great. Our next panelist is, she is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Salesforce. And in a past life as well, she was also in film production, in film producing. And so I checked out her IMDb profile. She actually has worked on a number of really interesting shows, including Nurse Jackie, Boardwalk Empire. She's also worked on the movie Wall Street. Help me welcome to the stage, Jody Innerfield.
All right. Just clarification, I was like 2 years old when Wall Street came out. I worked on Wall Street 2.
Wall Street 2.
I just realized how cool is it to be able to announce a brand new position right here, right?
Yeah, so. Right. You didn't even know you had a new job.
I didn't until
really cool.
Until Jason told me. Thank you. Fantastic. Well, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. As Jason said, my name is Jody Innerfield. I'm currently a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Salesforce, where I've been for almost 5 years. Before that, I was in film production for a little bit. I was also in HR before going back to business school at University of Michigan. Go Blue. Nope. Nobody? That's wow. Weird. Wow. Okay, we're going to fix that. Did a stint in an internship at Amazon, and then my first role in product marketing was at a small HR tech startup in San Francisco, where I was for 6 months before coming to Salesforce. And you might be thinking, okay, your first 90 days has been like 5 years ago. How do you contribute to this conversation, Jody? Well, I've actually been in 4 different roles in my 5 years at Salesforce, and at a company as large as Salesforce, I think we have 500 product marketers and 75,000 employees. Every time I've changed roles, it's like going to a new company, even though I've been on the same team or in the same org. So definitely excited to share some insights and some learnings today.
Fantastic, thank you. And for me, I've been in the product marketing space, I'd say, over a decade now. So it was started at American Express before it was even product marketing, I'll be honest, and it was called account and merchant development, which at the end of the day was literally product marketing. And then from there, I've been at a bunch of startups, Fortune 500 companies, and each step of the way, I think one of the things that I've really realized is no one firm, no one discipline is going to actually, you can't take a playbook and say, here's what I'm going to do for every single company every time you go there. You have to adjust, you have to be able to be nimble and really assess the situation that you're in so that you can really take on the challenges that you have. So going from a individual contributor to a Fortune 500 down to a Series C, there's so many different variances that happen. So this is sort of really near and dear to me because I just started my new job about a year ago, but there's still so many processes, there's so many places that we're still actually putting in place, having a new CPO now, new CTO. So it's every time someone actually comes in, it's not even about changing a job, but when you have a new product officer, when you have a new technology officer, you have a new CRO, they want to come in and influence, and then product marketing becomes the first sort of level of defense against everything that's happening. They go, well, we don't have this, we need to do this, and you have to play about 16 different hats. So, I thought this was a very relevant conversation.
So you're really always in the first 90 days you always have to adapt and change based on not only when you start a new job, but when
someone else starts.
When a new leadership, someone else on your team starts, yeah.
Exactly. So, for us, I think Compliant Vantage, we are a security, compliance, AML space, but that's where we are. So what we do is we do the basic question we ask financial institutions is, should they do business with an entity? At the end of the day, it could be an individual, it could be a corporation, and it's pretty tough for us to be able to go out to the compliance folks and say, here, change the way, because they're probably the most risk averse, and ask them to use technology, give some control away. How do you really go in front of them and have them understand what's happening? I think Paxos is next here, and they're a client of ours, and it's really fun to be, I'm so interested in now learning as to how they actually do product marketing, because it is sort of that two-sided way of how we actually work with the technology over there, and the crypto firms, DigitalFi, name it, we're at the forefront of all of this. So the current Russia-Ukraine conflict, we were in the middle of all of it, and our CEO, he's a bit outspoken, so it becomes a lot of fun when we're there.
So you've changed roles a bit recently as well,
Yes.
right? So do you have a playbook for your first 90 days?
You know what, I have a playbook that I go by, right? But the way I look at product marketing is, as I think Jacqueline just said it, I think it's a lot about understanding the research, the market. It's about the macro world. It's about understanding your competitor. It's about the go-to-market. But you can't do all of it in the first 90 days, and you have to sort of pick and choose where do you want to go. For us, revenue was a big driver. We were still about to hire a new CPO, so we said, you know what, I'm going to concentrate more on the marketing, go-to-market, the content piece. Our content was very high level, very much thought leadership, but we were never bringing them down the funnel. So how do we get more product level content for us to be able to come in? And then we said, fine, let's put the processes with our product team so that we have the right funnel approach in terms of how do we go to market, but we didn't really do the market research end of it just yet. So now we're moving into it, and it's been a year. But yeah, usually I'd like to do everything, but it's a team of two. And I can't hire fast enough. We can't hire, and there is value, people see it, but we need to be able to really hire fast for us to be able to take everything on. We have 4 product lines, and which is being managed by just 2 of us.
Yeah, I think usually, at least in my experience, either changing companies or changing roles, you've been brought in to solve a problem, right? Whether you're an individual contributor or a manager, there's either a skills gap on a team or something that needs to happen on the team, and that's why you're coming in. And so I think for your first 90 days, at least for my first 90 days, that at least gives me something to start with. Like, okay, for example, in my current role that I started just a little over 90 days ago, I think I started in November, I lead a team that is responsible for launch strategy across all of our products. So that means we coordinate and strategize and streamline launches, everything from like product launches to release marketing, naming, pricing and packaging, and then we also do like emerging product launches too that don't have a home. And we hadn't really reevaluated anything from our naming guidelines or our launch strategies in like 3 years. So it was time. It was time for a refresh. The company has more than doubled in that time. And so for my first 90 days, I was really brought in to kind of put more structure back into that team and reevaluate how we're doing things and see are there things that we should shift. But I don't know about you, but the worst thing I possibly could have done was go in and say, okay, great, I'm here to change things and let's go and reevaluate these things. I really spent my first 90 days just listening and asking questions. Yes. And I think for me, especially because, and I'm interested to hear your perspective here, like I came into a team that already existed, that had been on the team for a while, and I came in as a new manager and added in a couple people. The worst thing I could have done would have been saying like, hey, here's what I've seen, because I had been in an adjacent team and worked with them. So I really just had to listen. And it really isn't until, so one of the things I exhibited and saw in those conversations was ways we could change the process by which we bring all of the various product marketing teams together and create more cohesiveness and collaboration. But that was something my team really needed to come up with. They needed to put that together. And it's taken now, I think just yesterday was our pitch. We finally put together this idea of these launch councils and presented it to leadership. And it took about 3.5 months, even before the first 90 days. But I don't think it would have gotten to where it was had I just kind of come in and said like, hey, I think we have a problem here that we should fix. What do you think? It had to come from the team.
And it's interesting because at Salesforce, I assume there is probably a lot more hierarchical and a few
a couple teams. Couple teams. Yeah, just a little bit.
So I would love to be able to understand from your standpoint, like, because from a startup standpoint, we have free reins, right? We come in, for the most part. But love to understand from you as like, how is that different? Because, yesterday we were talking, it's just 2 separate worlds when you're working with a Salesforce or when you're working with a sort of a startup. And because you have so many different red tapes, hierarchical sort of ways, and it's really interesting. But to answer your first question, yes, I agree. Listen, understand, cultivate relationships, right? Do not take for granted your product team, your sales team, your marketing team. Make sure you understand them, empathize with them. That's the first thing I would say for anyone, because for for us to come in and be arrogant,
Yeah.
to say we've done this, we know this better, is to be basically alienating the rest of the organization. And you are, at the end of the day, sort of the middle, I don't even know what you call it, but the middle
Spoke.
the spoke of the wheels, right? And we need to make sure that we have to have that right engagement with everyone. So, because I've seen product teams where they've come in and they've said, why is product marketing here? Because they don't know any better. Are they here to take my job? Or, marketing used to come in and say, wait, why are they writing content? That's our job. Or sales comes in and who are you to tell me what it is? So we need to make sure that we cultivate those relationships. So listen, cultivate relationships, and then understand what the strategic outcome for the company is, near term, short term, and then also long term, so that you can adjust your strategies to such a way. For us, I came in and my CM was like, I don't have any heads here for us to relaunch the website and redo the brand. I said, oh, okay, great. Oh, by the way, you also have to redo the company messaging while you do the brand and while you do this. So can we just redo all of that first, and then we'll figure out what we need to do next? Oh, also, the product team really isn't having the right products process. Can you also help with that? The sales team needs a new deck. Can you do this?
Prioritization is key for those first 90 days.
Right? So they will keep on piling, and at some point, the prioritization becomes very key.
Yeah.
How does that work in Salesforce? Is it similar?
Yeah, I mean, chaotic, and everybody has a different priority. Yeah. Yes, I think at Salesforce, there is a lot of hierarchy, but it's also really transparent, which is very helpful. So everybody publishes a V2 MOM, which is just kind of our vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. So that's kind of how we do business planning. And you can see everybody's either personal V2 MOM or their team V2 MOM. And so you really understand the charter of each team and where each team is trying to go. I think what I try and do for my team is really just understand what are the priorities of my manager, what are the priorities of their manager, and how does this go up the chain? Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to help me and my team prioritize. So there's because we are a cross-functional team, there's no shortage of requests and questions and challenges that come in, and that prioritization, I have to make that prioritization based on, okay, what is top down, because that's also going to help me understand where am I going to get resources and buy-in and support, because we can't do everything alone.
Correct.
I'm going to need to tap into stakeholders, but if I pick the thing that's nobody's priority, nobody's going to jump on board to help.
Absolutely.
We have some great questions here. Thank you.
Hard ones also, so I'll give the hard ones to you. I'll take the easy ones.
Thank you. So how do you sit back and listen for the first 90 days while you're simultaneously trying to demonstrate your value to the org via impact? You go crazy. I don't know. How do you do it?
Well, first you go crazy, but I think there are subtleties in how we do this, right? Yes, you're listening, but at the same time, you are understanding your strategy, you're repositioning the process, you're working with them. For a sales team, when they come to us and they talk about how the process isn't working, our decks aren't providing the right messages, it's too product heavy, or it's not product enough. So we sit, we listen, we talk, and then what I do is I just start having these conversations with our sales leaders and individual sales folks. So it's not just about listening, but it's also the ability to have these conversations with everyone, one-to-one, to be able to just understand, so they know that there's something happening. And then you have to deliver something. So for me, it was, let's strip down the deck with just 60 slides down to maybe 7. That'd be great. And let's not talk about product. That's what our pre-sales and engineering team is for. Let's make sure that we have more about the value, our case studies, our use cases, what we actually think about. Now again, it depends on every little detail, right? We work in financial services. It's a little bit of a backwards way of looking at it. They are more about show it to me and I'll believe it if you've worked with somebody. It may be different for others. For us in financial services, we really need to make sure that we show to them that there's someone else who's used us. So we took everything away from product and we left that for the demo. And we trained the team on just understanding the pain points. Listen to the customers, guys, right? Oh, well, the competitive analysis, just listen to the customers. Everything will fall into place. Let's not try to make your roadmaps around competitive analysis. Let's make it around our customers and their needs. So it's how to change that orientation. So listen, but at the same time, start taking your notes and understand what we need to change.
I would also say, I think the two things are synthesizing information from those conversations and finding the low-hanging fruit. So yes, you're sitting back and listening, but you're also then, to Rohan's point, you're the connective tissue that can bring up, oh, did you talk to this person? Or, oh, I noticed this from this conversation with sales, aligns to this from pricing. let's bring those dots together, and you get to play the new kid card for 90 days. And that's like, hey, I don't understand this. Can you just help me understand? I'm new. And again, like I've done this now 4 times within Salesforce. I'm not new to Salesforce, but every time you put on a new hat, you get carte blanche to kind of play that card. Yep. And don't underestimate the value of connecting the dots and synthesizing that information. You might be taking for granted that, like, did sales not listen to, did pricing not talk to sales? Maybe they didn't. People move quickly, things happen. The other thing I would say is low-hanging fruit. Identify what that low-hanging fruit is that really does add value. You might be like, this is so simple, I can't believe this is me adding value. But for example, when I came into my current team, I'm very big on organization and having like a folder for things and having templates, and that just didn't exist. The team was just trying to keep going, and they just didn't have time to put that together. So I was like, great, here's our Google folder, here's our Quip folder, here's like all the documents and resources in one place. And they were like, oh. I'm like, yeah, sure, great. So there's always something you can do. I know it feels like you're just talking and just listening rather, but there really is value you can add.
Right. So the second question, how do you juggle competing products as to not to overload priorities for your sellers?
Not well. Salesforce is like the definition of complexity in this. I think that, our sellers we're not a good example of this because we're so big and complex, but basically like we have sales teams that specialize in each product, but then even within a specialization that you could have a bag of like 60 different products, and it really just comes down to identifying for like what's going to help drive pipeline and revenue and focusing, right? So yes, there might be a bag of 60 products, but what are the 10 that are going to help sales teams make their number, what's relevant for their customer? That's you have to make, again, it's about prioritization. It's not easy.
I think, and what I would add to that is the folks outside, and there's also a sales convention happening outside as well. They'll probably hate for me to say this, but throw it back to them. Help them understand. It's like, what is the pain point you're trying to solve for that prospect, right? Now it's a requirement for them to have at least a one-pager for us before we even have any conversations, to be able to say, hey, listen, I've had initial conversations, our BDRs have had it, here's what the prospect is looking for right now, and let's then reorient ourselves as to what product it is where we're looking to go, because that also feeds down to our pre-sales and our sales engineering teams, all the way down to our product team who's doing the demo. So we want to make sure that we have that cohesiveness. So our first meeting is all about listen and understand your prospect. Number 2 is regurgitate everything you've heard. Make sure you provide use cases for them to be able to really understand what's happening. And then at that point, when you've built their trust, engaged the prospect, then let's start talking about our product. Because if you do it too soon, people are going to glaze over because you really are not hitting the pain points that they're thinking about. Hopefully that answers your question. I love the next one. Best advice for telling a cohesive story when you're marketing 10 disparate or 1,000 disparate products. Yeah. How does that work?
Hopefully at your company, you have 10 but seemingly disparate products because they all have a similar theme in the problem they're solving for your customer. If they're very disparate in solving problems for very different customers, that's probably a conversation to have with the product team around, hey, we need to really hone in on who is our target customer and what problem are we solving for them. That being said, at a company like Salesforce, where we have many, many, many products and we acquire even more, at the end of the day, I think Jackie was talking about like what's the brand mission? Like ours is we help our customers connect to their customers in whole new ways. So any product we build or company we acquire has to be about how are we helping our customers connect to their customers. And that is our through line. And if a new product doesn't help us tell that story, it doesn't fit, and it's a square peg round hole, and what we often see is it doesn't sell, and then it just quietly goes away.
So we have 4 major product lines, and for us, I think, actually even before I get there, show of hands, how many people actually have a product marketecture, sort of that, just hierarchical way of how do you go about your messaging for your firm? Anyone? We have a few. Yeah.
That helps.
That really helps us.
That helps.
Only because what we try to do is, when I'm there, the first thing I do is put the product architecture together is, okay, what's the biggest problem we're looking to solve? Which is, for our clients is, should we do business with this entity? It's the most basic, most rudimentary, but then there's branches that come off. And then from those, we start talking about all the different sort of branches that are coming off of that. When you're telling a cohesive story, it's never about your product. It's never about your company. It's never about anything more than your customer and their pain points and how you're helping them solve it. So if that is sort of the mandate, switch it. That's the first thing I would say. It's about your customers always. I think before I came there, our sort of tagline was crime fighters don't wear capes. I didn't understand what that meant, and I was just sort of came there and looked, I was just like, what does this mean? Like, well, we help solve financial crime. I was like, okay, well, this is a little too far of a reach, but this is what I mean, right? Like, it's cool, it's cute, but it doesn't do anything when someone looks at it. When we look at, I think it's Square who says payment infrastructure for the internet. I believe that makes sense to me, right? So we need to make sure that in one line you're able to actually say what is it that you're looking to be able to do. So that's the hardest part. So your cohesive story shouldn't be more than maybe one sentence long, and then from there you really have to come around from that.
We have time for one more. So the next one, where did it go?
Well, we've got, do you use KPIs? This is
I liked the what did you know, wish you know, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started your position? That was the one I was looking for.
Fantastic, let's go with that one. For me, I think it's, how do you cultivate relationships with the various different teams? It's also a bit of bravado there when we go in there, because you can't look scared, you can't look intimidated. There's a lot of folks that are happening. So it's building that package, right? We can't be introverts, unfortunately, as product marketers. We have to be sales folks, right? So it's how do you really go about exuding that confidence? And when you sit back and wait for things to happen, they won't. So number one. Number two, have a playbook. Just really simple. Just make sure you guys understand what that playbook looks like. I have a slide that I just go through every single time, and I'm like, this is what we do. And they go, oh, wow, that's awesome. I think I built that about 6 years ago, and I still keep on revising it. So that's...
Yeah. I will say, I'll talk about something I wish I knew when I started my first product marketing position at the startup I was at before Salesforce. I was telling you the story yesterday.
Yeah.
When I was interviewing, I was reporting to interviewing with the CMO, and she's like, we want you here because we need to rethink our product launch process. We don't really have a good process in place, and we want you to come and put process in place from the ground up. I was the second product marketer. I was like, great, sure, I can do that. I come in, I have some conversations. I'm like, yeah, I think we can do it, da-da-da-da. And on the marketing side, they're like, great. I go and meet with the product team, and they're like, whoa. We have a great product launch process. This is it. We know what we're doing. It turns out, again, this was a company of like 90 people. Yeah, the product team had been owning the product launch process, and as they were growing the product marketing team, now they wanted product marketing to own the product launch process. And so what I wish I knew was, just because, and I started saying, like, you're hired for something that's probably going to give you a good sense of where you're going to start. That doesn't mean you just get started.
Yep.
That means you just ask questions and you really understand the lay of the land. Because what you're told or what you infer from an interview process is often a little bit different than what you experience when you actually get there. And so I think that just goes back to what I now do every time I get into a new role is just listen, ask questions. And the people I've seen be successful come into Salesforce, especially over these last 2 years when everyone is remote and it's been a really, really hard time, I'd imagine, to start a new job. The people who are successful are those that even if they have tons of experience and tons of value to add right away, they listen. They don't come in and try and change things. They don't come in with, here are the 10 things, I did in my last company that I think they just listen and understand the politics, understand the background, understand the lay of the land, and they start to trickle in their value add. And that's something that I've really tried to do now every time I change a role, I know I have value I can add here. That's why I'm on the team, but that's not my purpose when I get started.
Are we good? Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. Give it up for Jody and Ron.
Should we go that way?
I love that. That last device is so important. We want to get in and start doing things so fast, but I think to sit back and listen for the first 90 days is an important thing to remember. All right. Great. Want to toss up the slide there for the next session? Great. So, introduce our next session. It kind of plays well off this last one. This one, the one just then was all about what to do in the first 90 days. This one is all about what to do when you're establishing product marketing in an organization where it's never existed before. So our speaker today is Allison Wheely, and she is the Director of Product Marketing at Paxos. And Allison has done this at 3 different companies, if I'm correct, Allison. She's also a PMA ambassador in New York, and she's the lead product marketing teacher at the Product Gym. So she knows this topic inside and out. So help me welcome to the stage, Allison Wheely.
Thank you. All right. So let's jump in. Thanks, everybody. I'm excited to be here. And I actually think I may have been at the inaugural Product Marketing Alliance Summit back in New York City in 2019. I don't know, someone can correct me if it was either 2018 or 2019. Was anybody else here then? Yeah, hi guys. That was a fun time, and I'm excited to be back. So great, I'm gonna talk to you guys about establishing product marketing for the very first time at your company or business line. And I think it'll be a nice follow-up to the lovely fireside chat we just had. But instead of it being about you being new to the team and what to do in the first 90 days, it's a slightly different twist, right? It's product marketing doesn't exist here, and I have to actually establish the functional role of product marketing as well as be a new person doing this in a company. Let's jump in. Here's what we're gonna do with our short time today. Number 1, I wanna get to know you all, so we're gonna do that first. Number 2, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. We're gonna review the premise so we're all kind of on the same page as to what we're talking about. And then I'm gonna give you some very tactical tips of things I want you all to do if you're in their position, like literally on the job. Like these are the things that I think you should do. It's gonna be very executional, and I hope it'll be very helpful for you all. And I'll conclude with some tips and pitfalls. Okay, I wanna get to know you. So let's do that right off the bat. So I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand if the following things apply to you, so I can get an understanding of who we have in the room, and I can help kind of tailor what I say to you all. So number 1, please raise your hand if you have ever worked for a company where you were the first product marketing person at that company. Okay, great. A few of you, maybe not quite half, but actually quite a lot of you. Okay, good, great. Raise your hand if you currently, in your current job, work at a company where you were the first product marketing hire. Oh, a lot of you actually, but not quite as much. Okay, great. Raise your hand if you have ever worked on a new business line or product, and thus were establishing product marketing for that vertical, even if like product marketing already existed in your company. Okay, I think that got some of you all that didn't raise your hands, I think, the first time. Okay, and then finally, how many of you all have worked at a company where product marketing was just generally not well understood? Like people didn't quite know what you're supposed to do? Okay. So someone literally just like went like that. Okay, great. So what I'm gonna tell you today should apply to all of these situations, and I hope to be able to give you really tactical next steps or tactical things to employ to address these situations. Let's jump into it. Now that I've gotten to know you, I would love to just tell you a little bit about myself so we all know each other, we got a relationship. I started out my career in the nonprofit sector, actually worked for a local nonprofit called Grow NYC. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer. And then I transitioned into financial services at Citibank. And from there, I realized I didn't want to work in a big global corporate environment. I wanted to be in tech, and I moved into fintech. And I've been in this fintech space for tech startups ever since. Worked at LearnVest, which was a fintech app. Moved over to Policy Genius, which is disrupting the insurance space. And I'm now currently at Paxos, which is a regulated blockchain infrastructure company. So that's me professionally. Personally, I love the outdoors. I love to travel. That middle picture is me in Cambodia. I also have a 2-year-old daughter and actually another one on the way in June. All right, and here's where I've established product marketing for the very first time. So Paxos, my current role, was my 3rd time doing this. I started out at LearnVest, did it at Policy Genius, now at Paxos. At Paxos, I was the first, so I'll start with my current role and we'll work backwards. At Paxos, I was the first product marketing person at the company ever hired, and I was hired as a director level to build out the team. Policy Genius was also hired as a director level to build out the team, but there had been this one product marketing specialist hired a few months before me that was kind of off working on like a specific product squad. So she had already been there, but the function itself hadn't really been established in the company. So that was Policy Genius. And at LearnVest, I was hired as a product marketing manager, so an individual contributor role, not a hiring manager. I was also the first hire there in a product marketing role. And one of the takeaways that I want you all to have is that it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're a VP or a director or a specialist or a manager, if you're the first product marketing hire, all of the things I'm gonna tell you are applicable to you, and you can do them no matter what role you're at. So I don't want someone to sit in the room and be like, oh, I'm just an IC, individual contributor. I'm just product marketing manager or specialist. These are things that like the leaders should be doing. No, you are the leader. You're the only product marketing person there. You're leading this function. So I wanna empower you to think of yourself like that no matter what quote unquote title you have. All right. So our premise, we're establishing product marketing for the first time. It's new, all right? Here are some of the things you might be up against. There might be a lack of understanding about what product marketing is or does. I think like every single person in the room almost raised their hand when I asked that question, so I think that's fair to say. Here are some of the questions I've gotten. How is product marketing different than regular marketing? Curious to hear from you guys, like any other common questions or themes that have come up for you all? Does anyone want to like shout one out? I feel like everybody raised their hand when I asked. How are you different than product management? That's a great one. I love that. Thank you for being the brave volunteer. Anybody else? Why do I have to, what would you know about sales? I'm a salesperson. What do you have to offer me? I love that. Over here.
Basically, what do you do?
Yeah, what the hell do you do? Okay, I love it. Okay, that's the first thing. The other thing is I always find that there's I was gonna say pretty significant, it varies, but there's usually misaligned expectations about what you're gonna do. I've been told, oh, you're here to make pitch slides. Nope, I'm not here to make your pitch slides. I've been asked, why aren't we running ads in the subway? I'm like, well, I don't choose the ads. I'm not in charge of the ad campaigns. They're like, you're not? I'm like, no. So just a lot of misaligned expectations and misunderstandings. So that was these are the challenges, right? But on the flip side, there's some really solid positives. If you're the first product marketer, that typically means you have stakeholders like really excited to have you and kind of eager to work with you. If you feel like that's not the case, it is. There are stakeholders like that. Just go find them. Like go find your allies. There always are, especially if you're the first and the org has already kind of existed. If you're the first product marketing person, that usually means there's established product managers already there. I've never worked for a tech company where they hired product marketers before they had product managers. It's almost always the opposite. Like they hire PMs first, they work on a product, and then they're like, oh wait, we need product marketers. So that's a good thing. It means like you have this solid team of PMs that kind of already know the product, know the market, and you can use them. Lastly, and my favorite, is if you're the first product marketer, you have a huge opportunity to make a massive impact, and I want you all to make that impact. Like I don't want you to squash that opportunity. I want you to leverage it, capitalize on it, and run with it, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. So for the past 2 companies where I've done this, I always feel this huge pressure to be successful, and to me that means 4 things. I wanna add clear, notable value that people notice. Like, I'm not doing it in a vacuum, people see it. Number 2, I want to establish really strong relationships with my coworkers. Number 3, I want to produce work that drives a business forward. And number 4, I want to contribute to strategy, not just tactics. And I think a lot of product marketers fall into the arena of getting really tactical or producing content and versus being a strategic partner. So we're going to talk about that today. All right, so you need a clear path to setting yourself up for success as the first product marketer in your company or for your business line. And again, even if you aren't the first, if product marketing is just not well understood, this still applies for you. So I created a 5-step plan. You know I'm a product marketer when I want to package my slides into a 5-step plan, but this is my 5-step plan. And we're going to go through each of these. And these are pretty tactical. These are things I actually encourage you to take back to your jobs and do in the coming months. Or if you ever end up in a job where you're the first product marketer, highly recommend you do these things. There are things that I have now kind of honed and tweaked over the past 3 companies that I've worked for. All right, before we jump into this, the meat of this content, are there any questions about any of this stuff so far? Okay, guys. We'll also do questions at the end, but I just want to make sure we're all okay up to now. All right. Step 1 is to educate your coworkers about product marketing, what product marketing is or does. And I literally want you to create a deck that's your product marketing 101 deck. And it's not about your company. You could present it anywhere. You could present it literally, you can take it with you from company to company. But you're going to establish what product marketing is and does, how you add value, your engagement model with stakeholders. And I don't want you to just create the deck and email it out. I want you to go on an internal roadshow. You're going to be a comedian with tour dates around the country, and you're going to have a meeting with product managers, and have a meeting with your sales team, and have a meeting with executive leaders. You're going to take it on a tour. And this gives you the opportunity to establish yourself as a leader, but it also creates a platform where people can ask questions. You guys can talk about it. It fosters discussion right off the bat. And again, it doesn't matter what level you are, what title you have, you can do this. And it allows you to set those clear expectations with your stakeholders about what you will do and what you won't do. And it's not so personal to them at that point. So you're not saying to them, I'm not going to do this thing you want. You're just talking at a high level. Here's what product marketing is or does. So it sets those expectations right off the bat without disappointing anybody. These are some slides from my deck. You can see I have a slide that's that explains who we work with, and it has product, marketing, sales. Product marketing sits in the middle. I have a slide that talks about our responsibilities, and I have us go around a circle where the first one is understand the market and the customer. The second is develop your positioning and messaging. The third is, what does it even say? Enable internal teams like your sales and marketing teams. The fourth is drive product adoption. And so this slide deck that I'm referring to has about 12 to 15 slides in it. I did this roadshow when I first joined my company at Paxos. I did it at my old company, and whenever new employees join, I send it to them as well. So I'm hey, here's what product marketing does. Okay, step 2 of my 5-step plan. You want to focus on strategic efforts and quick wins together in your first several months. And you want to be really intentional about doing both. A lot of people get drawn over to the right side, quick wins, because there's a ton of fires that need to be put out, especially if you're in a tech startup. It's all this work has to get done. Do this work now. And so it's really easy to jump on the work, but you want to make sure that you're starting with the strategy as well, and you're balancing both. So focusing on strategic initiatives will establish yourself as a strategic partner, leader, right off the bat. What does this mean? Okay, what are you actually telling me to do, Allison? This can look like different things depending on the needs of your company, right? It could be a journey mapping workshop. It could be analyzing the competitive marketplace, but then turning that into a strategic deck about where your company needs to go. It could be creating strategic positioning. So it can be different things. There's different things you can do that are strategic, right? Just pick the most needed thing and make sure you do that. And again, when you do it, don't just do it in a vacuum. You have to be sharing it out. You have to socialize it. In terms of quick wins, you can easily publish a few pieces of content, a one-pager, etc.
right off the bat that shows like, oh, I'm here to add value. I'm here to actually produce for you. And that's also important. If you fall too much on the strategic side when you're working for a fast-paced company that has needs, then you'll also lose credibility. So you have to, here what I'm trying to say is like balance both and be intentional about both. At my company, Paxos, in my first quarter, I hosted journey mapping workshops with the entire BD, business development, and customer success teams. And we used those workshops to create our cross-functional roadmaps. It was really strategic work. It was live. We had a lot of people involved. And as well, in parallel, I also helped create the company's first one-pager. We'd never had a one-pager for a product before, and our first ebook. So it was like I was very intentional about like, I'm going to do these things that I will give you as deliverables, and I will also lead the strategic initiative. All right, step 3. I want you to define and socialize a clear roadmap. There's a number of things that this roadmap will do for you. Number 1, it helps to put all your stakeholders at ease because you can say to them like, oh, I hear you. Your items are on the roadmap. But also, it helps to show your stakeholders that you're prioritizing them and maybe you don't get to that thing until X date, but it's on the roadmap. Everybody feels better knowing there's a blueprint. We all just want a blueprint, people. And the other thing I'll say about the roadmap is you don't build it in a vacuum. You actually have to take a lot of input from other stakeholders to build it. So this actually circles back to the fireside chat we just heard where Jody was saying she spends her first 90 days listening and learning. Well, that listening and learning process will allow you to create the roadmap. You create your roadmap, you define it, you socialize it, and I highly recommend as you establish product marketing, you do this as part of your process. This is a screenshot of my roadmap from this year, this quarter. The things I typically have on it are the initiative name, a description of it, what type of initiative it is. So is this a strategy? Is this strategic work? Is this content creation, etc.? The timing, effort versus impact, high, medium, low, and what stakeholders are involved. And even just doing this process really establishes yourself as like, I'm serious, I have a plan, I've listened to you all, and I'm committed. All right, step 4. I want you to choose 1, maybe 2 things, fundamentals, that you're gonna deliver on a regular basis to the company. And you're gonna brand these as programs. That cadence, that regular cadence can be monthly, but it could also just be once a year. I don't care. But it needs to be some sort of strategic fundamental you commit to doing and you can brand internally. And I'll give you some examples. At Paxos, we implemented a quarterly competitive intelligence program where we do the competitive research, we do the audit, but then we turn it into a shareable format that we share out to the entire company. And we do this quarterly, and we do it in a clear and similarly structured way every time, so it kind of looks and feels the same. We branded it. It's our competitive intelligence quarterly program. The entire company knows about it. People talk about it. They're like, oh yeah, product marketing does that on a quarterly basis. Like, they're gonna share it out to the company probably in a couple months. Like, wait for that thing. It's talked about internally, it's known, it's respected, and people really look forward to it. Competitive intelligence is something that you guys should all be doing anyway, right? It's like part of our jobs. So what I'm suggesting here is a slight shift. It's not just doing it, but it's committing to doing it on a regular basis in a structured format and branding it internally. Does that make sense, that difference? Yeah. So choose a few of those things, and that will really establish product marketing as a function, not just like this random thing that's happening ongoing. It's like, no, this is a function, and here's what we're producing for you. All right. Final step, step 5. You're gonna report out on clear metrics, and similar to number 4, you're gonna do it in a similar format or structure and with a regular cadence. My opinion is that too many product marketers overlook this step. We're not metrics focused enough. But sharing that data will establish yourself as a credible leader and establish product marketing, establish the credibility of product marketing right off the bat. My company at Paxos, we implemented bi-monthly readouts, all about the data on various initiatives that we have. We have about 30 cross-functional stakeholders attend those readouts on a bi-monthly basis across all of our different teams. And again, you want this to kind of be a repeatable format and very shareable. And I'm not just suggesting you create an internal dashboard that people have access to. Only a few random people are going to look at that. I'm suggesting you socialize this with a regular cadence in a repeatable way. I've suggested some potential metrics you could be reporting out on a regular cadence, but again, that's up to you all and depending on what you're producing, working on, and what your company cares about. All right, we've finished the 5-step plan. So let's say product marketing is new to your company, you're the first one there, or maybe it's not new to your company, but you're establishing it for a new business line. You've done these 5 steps. Maybe you're 6 months in and you've done these 5 steps. Great job, everybody. Now what I have for you is just a few final tidbits, a tip and a pitfall. These are kind of my final parting comments. So tip number 1, as you're starting out, look for those ad hoc one-off initiatives that have big strategic impact. And this again just goes towards establishing yourself as a key and valuable player. You will always find these, especially in like a growing startup type environment. There's always these, and you just kind of have to like go and pick them up, like pick this up and be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna work on this. And it might be random. There were some random ones for me. When I first joined Paxos, we didn't have a clear method to segment our users according to like revenue or size. And I wasn't really sure that should be product marketing's responsibility, but nobody was doing it. So I partnered with a data and analytics guy. Together, we created a tiering model, and that tiering model is still what the entire company uses today. At Policy Genius, we had a partner approach us and want to do a co-marketing campaign, so we did it, fine, it was over with. And after it was over, I thought, maybe this could be a revenue model for us and has more runway for us. So I analyzed it and created kind of this whole strategy, co-marketing campaign strategy based on what I thought like the revenue potential could be. Nobody really asked me to do that, but product marketing was new at Policy Genius, and I sort of seized it as an opportunity to add sort of an interesting value add. So there will always be those. Just kind of look for those here and there because they can really establish yourself and make a big difference. Final slide. This is the pitfall. So this is one of the pitfalls to avoid category. I really want you all to avoid turning into sales enablement machines. We are not sales enablement machines, and it's very easy to fall into this trap. So all of my 5 steps, 1 through 5, were about establishing the function and being a strategic partner. I think step 3 was the roadmap. You guys remember we talked about defining and socializing a clear roadmap? Great, well, what that roadmap enables you to do is it enables you to create sales collateral and marketing collateral according to highest priority and strategic needs. And it also enables you to say to stakeholders, oh, thank you for that request. It actually didn't come up in our roadmap planning sessions where we talked about the highest needs. So I'll add it to the backlog and we can discuss it for the next quarter or the next month or whatever. But you just want to avoid turning into a person that continually is a request taker and content creator because it won't establish the strong product marketing function that your company needs. All right. Great. So that's it for me. I would love to hear comments and questions from you. What resonated? What additions would you make? And what else do you all want to talk about? How much time do I have left?
We have about 5, 6.
5 minutes?
So time for questions. But first, everyone give it up for Allison. Thanks,
Thank
Allison. All right. So let's start with one on the top. What do you recommend if there's giant gaps in market knowledge and product audience and use from giant gaps in market knowledge and product audience and use from product team without taking that on from product marketing? Maybe if someone in the audience maybe asked that question, wants to just clarify. what they're asking? Yep, go ahead.
So I work for an organization that has existed for a very long time, but we're introducing product marketing.
Okay.
It's going well but slow, understanding how to have it work, but in truth, a lot of our products don't have true product owners or product managers running their business. They've just maintained things, but they don't actually have the depth of knowledge that product marketing needs to move things forward about who actually uses their product, who's their target audience, what are the competitors in the landscape. And it's very technical stuff. So just wondering if you ever experienced something like that and how you would approach it.
Okay, so two things come to mind for you. The first thing that comes to mind is that if your organization has existed for a while, the knowledge is there among the people that work there. It just hasn't been codified. So it's been no one's job, no one owns it. Maybe there hasn't been product managers that own it. It hasn't been documented the way certain tech companies might so clearly document user needs and customer research. But the brain trust is there because you have people that have been working there for a long time. So I would, number one, interview or work with your coworkers as much as possible to squeeze out that information from them as best as you can. And then number two, I would implement your own type of customer research, customer interviews, whatever that means for you, as well as kind of outside third-party data to analyze your market to supplement it. But I think, so those things, of course, you want to do. Those are your stereotypical product marketing work. But I guess I would also kind of push back on this idea of the understanding doesn't exist. It sounds like it does. It just hasn't had the right ownership or normal roles, titles within the company. But I bet that it's there, and you just have to kind of squeeze it out and find it.
Nice. Okay. Thanks. Next question. Can you talk about journey mapping workshops? Maybe talk about something you've done.
Yes, I love journey. I just did journey mapping workshops last week in New York City in person with my team. It was so fun because we're all remote. Here's how I do journey mapping workshops, and you can Google this. It's a thing. There's school of thoughts around it. They're based on design thinking methodology, so I'm not making this up. Go read about it. Here's how I do it. First of all, we define the different stages of a customer journey. So it's usually awareness to consideration to choosing your product or closing the deal to integration if it's a B2B tech company to, beyond, right? So you clearly define what those different stages are in the customer's journey. Then you identify what activities are most commonly happening in each stage of the journey. From the customer's point of view, what are they doing? They're doing research, they're doing this, they're doing that. And who the stakeholders are in that journey. So if it's a direct-to-consumer customer journey, it's just one person, maybe the whole journey. But in a B2B environment, you might have different stakeholders come in at different phases of the buying process, right? Then you get everybody in a room and you ask them to write on Post-it notes, on one Post-it note each, pain points for that stage of the journey for the customer, from the customer's point of view. So you're literally writing pain point number one, pain point number two, and everyone puts them up on the board. Then you ask them to write down what I call bright lights, which are the opposite of pain points. It's what makes a customer happy or delighted at this stage of the journey. What tends to go really well. And again, this is a customer journey they're taking with your company or with your product in some way. Then you have everybody vote on the most impactful or biggest pain points versus bright lights. And you get your key focus areas of this is what we need to focus on in this stage of the journey as a cross-functional team. So product marketing needs to create better sales enablement material about this phase because it's really confusing to people, or product needs to improve the product in this phase of the journey because this is a really confusing part of the product. And you'll have different things pop for different cross-functional stakeholders in the room.
It's awesome. Just take a look up at that top one.
Oh, thank you all. All right.
You have time for a couple more. So okay. We'll go to the next one. At what point do you start adding people to your team after establishing the foundation? How do you go about product / initiative alignment for the team?
I'll tackle the first one. I know it's hard when people give answers that are it depends, but it really does depend on certain things. For me, it's always depended on what are the expectations of the overall org and marketing team for growth. Sometimes you're hired and there just isn't budget to grow a team, or it's, they're not ready yet to grow a team. So it depends on things other than just you and your own desires, right? However, having said that, I think in most situations where you're the first product marketer to a company or an org, it means that there should be many more of you. Like rarely does a company only need one product marketer for the whole company. That's just so rare. So I would advise you to be looking to grow your team and start immediately thinking about, well, what are the different product marketing needs? Do we need product marketers according to product line? Or do we need them according to customer journey, like early in the journey versus later in the journey? Do we need them according to functional needs, like sales enablement creation versus market research, for example? So I would encourage you to immediately start thinking about those things. If you are the first product marketer, your team needs more. Like, I hate to make a blanket statement. I do believe that's usually the case. And it just depends on broader company budgets and planning and all of that as to whether you actually get that head count or not. But I would encourage you to like immediately start thinking about that.
Great.
Yeah. How do you go about product initiative alignment? I think the second question feels very different to me than the first. I might need more clarification on the second. If we want to.
Do we know who in the audience asked it? Right there in back.
That question. So I guess how do you think about either aligning by product or functional area, or like kind of having the PMM do both? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Got it. Okay. Well, I actually kind of spoke about that a little bit in answering the first. I do think it varies by company. At Policy Genius, we hired product marketers according to product, and they sat on a product squad. It was a direct-to-consumer company. So you had a product marketer and a product manager and a tech lead, like all working really closely together. At my current company, Paxos, we're a B2B company, and we're organizing ourselves differently. We're organizing ourselves according to the sales journey needs, and we're hiring some people that are more focused on the later phases of the journey, so more technical sales enablement materials and the content creation around that. And then we're also hiring people that are a little bit more upwards bound in the journey and focusing more on market intelligence, competitive research, and that kind of stuff. So it really does vary depending on your org and what the needs are.
Great. That does it. Thanks so much, Allison.
Thank you.
That was awesome. All right. So right now is a coffee break. So that goes for about a half hour. So be back at 11:30, but there are two different tracks. So just so everyone knows, one is a workshop all about win-loss. So we have Andrew Peterson, Spencer Dent, who are over there on the, wave your hands, guys, so everyone knows who you are. You're going to be upstairs, right? Running that workshop? Yep. So head upstairs if you want to go to that workshop. That's an hour. The other option is to come here, and we're going to have kind of open roundtable discussions for the first half hour. So there'll be different tables with topics you can have conversations at. And then the second half will be a panel on sales enablement. So upstairs or here in a half hour. Thanks, everyone.
Fire Reels.
I'm Martin McGinnis.
Angelia McFarland.
Daniela Latham. Shannon Parks.
There are so many things I like about the summit. One of the biggest things for me is I'm actually remote, and so a few times a year I get to go out and be with my team, but this is some time that I get to go out and just be a part of the product marketing community. It is so incredibly validating to sit in a group of people that understand, the problems I'm running into and what I'm trying to achieve.
Product Marketing World is a really good opportunity to gain knowledge about marketing from various perspectives, but what I love the most is the people. This is a community from product marketers from all over the world working at all sorts of companies, and being able to get questions answered immediately from them, or being able to have a network of individuals all over from all these sorts of experiences is a really incredible opportunity, and I think one that the PMA, our organization, does very well.
I was introduced to Product Marketing World in 2019, and I was very excited about it because it is a forum where product marketing people can get together and we can learn from each other, we can network, and we can identify new strategies to help do our jobs.
I thought overall the quality of the content in the sessions was really high, and I got a lot of interesting insights. I made a lot of notes, and I'm really keen to take those back to my company.
This event has just been a phenomenal opportunity to connect with other product marketers in Austin, to learn about best practices and get some other insights from things that companies are doing really well that we could then implement in our company.
Product marketing has grown to become one of the key pillars within an organization. And yet, a well-known frustration point within the community is that most of our colleagues still don't understand the daily responsibilities of a product marketer. But we wanted to break this cycle and shine a light on the incredible value that this role brings to the table, which is why we've designed a brand new book with this exact goal in mind. Product Marketing Misunderstood is guaranteed to equip you with the first-hand knowledge, techniques, and stories you need to amplify your role, establish your authority, and elevate your strategic value. Each chapter outlines and breaks down the most common product marketing principles, such as positioning, personas, segmentation, and OKRs, and flips them on their head to show you how applying your own trade on your colleagues and peers can give them the ultimate aha moment and finally understand what an influential and strategic asset you are. Page after page is filled to the brim with real-life actionable advice from the likes of Drift, Privy, Intercom, G2, Adobe, Zendesk, and more. And by the end of this book, you'll have the ultimate toolkit to present a formidable product marketing force around you and position yourself in a way that quite simply cannot be misunderstood. Want to be understood? Then read Misunderstood. Order your copy today.
The Product Marketing Alliance membership is an incredible resource for product marketers with all types of experience.
It's definitely a goldmine of information and resources, from the Slack community to the templates and resources.
I can go out and see how are other people thinking about their growth strategies or product adoption. How are others thinking about the best ways to do customer interviews, or how others are setting up the content or customer advisory boards.
There's some great real life examples that I can either make a copy of or take as inspiration and really make my own.
Getting access to the videos and the templates is more than worth the cost, because you get to see what the top PMMs are doing and how they think.
From persona frameworks to go-to-market templates to articles written by experienced product marketers, this content has become an additional resource to help me succeed at my job.
My personal favorite is the mentorship program. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
When I have some planning time available, I love to look at the different videos and conferences that they have posted. I always love to hear how other companies are handling some of the challenges and opportunities that product marketing has.
I could then figure out what's the best way to adapt for us, as well as look at how other people are implementing them. So I can ultimately do the work of 5 individuals as a solo PMM.
Whether you're just transitioning into the field or you're a product marketing expert, I think there's content and materials that are useful for everyone.
And as someone looking to break into the role, I get a good grasp of what I should be doing and also what will make me successful once I do.
And the best thing is that as members, we get access to new content all the time. PMA constantly keeps adding more materials, articles, and tools.
This whole program's been very validating for me in my career.
And so I highly encourage you to check out.
I believe they keep pushing the bar and supporting their members to ensure that we become experts in the field.